Welcome to the podcast, People More Interesting Than Me. I'm your host, Michael Strumsky. This week, I have the pleasure of talking to Denise and James Gordon of the Skiptown All-Stars Podcast. If you've ever fantasized about selling your house and everything you own to start over in a new town, this is the episode for you. We talk about starting from where they got the idea, the yard sale to sell all their stuff, and basically the A to Z of everything you would think about they've gone through. Going overseas, different places to see, and road tripping, and the obvious guilty road snacks, everything. So, enjoy.
So I guess let's slowly dig into this. Let's start off with what city you guys are in currently.
We are in the Villages of Florida. It is a 55 and over retirement community. That's where
Denise is happy as a pig in mud here.
I love it. I went to here when I was 35, so everyone can just like jump off a building.
Let me guess. Biggest crime is golf cart accidents, correct?
It's that or golf clubs being stolen out of your golf cart when you're in a bar having a cocktail.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the biggest crime. Right now, there's somebody whose son is living with them. We just found out
We did.
he has a meth problem, and everybody has been like, "Oh my gosh, watch your golf clubs." Like in LA, if somebody has a meth problem, watch out, you're going to get your house broken into.
Right.
Get the copper pulled out, right?
Yes.
That's more of a 90s thing. I don't think, unless it's really bad, like The Wire type bad, they're not going to be pulling copper.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. But yeah, in LA, it's more like you could get pistol whipped from somebody with some meth head, but here it's you watch out, they might take your 9-iron.
Or your gnomes or your flamingos in the front. Is that a thing, or is that more of a
it is
cliche?
a thing.
Okay. Yeah.
It is a thing.
Yeah, there
people have a lot of
some
flamingos.
windmills, stuff like that.
Windmills, flamingos, gnomes, they are very popular. Yeah.
So tell me and the listeners, because I am already well versed, what you guys do with your moves and where you're at, not financially, but more, I don't know, journey wise, like Theseus.
Yeah. Okay. So last year we decided that we were going to put our house up for sale in the Los Angeles market. Denise used to run a spa. She had a client who was a real estate agent who came to her and said, "Look, I'm not going to predict what the market's going to do, but it looks like the Fed is going to raise interest rates. The market may take a dip, all this stuff. And I know you're trying to sell your house next year, but you may want to put it on the market now." We did. We feel pretty strongly we got top dollar for it at that time.
Yeah.
So it was fantastic advice in the end. What that allowed us to do was wipe out all of our debt and travel the country. I can now work remotely. Thank you. I guess it's like one of the few things for a lot of people that was good that came out of the pandemic. So the fact that I'm able to work from wherever we are allowed us the opportunity to sort of hold off on picking a new hometown. And through that sort of mentality, one of the fellow parents, one of our daughter's best friend's parents, his name's Bert Kreischer. He's a comedian. He does 3 podcasts, comedy tours, you name it. He just did a movie. So we didn't know him well, but we knew him well enough where he drugged me into the studio one day and said, "Look, you guys have kind of a unique thing going on. You should consider sort of chronicling your journeys in podcast form." I thought podcasts were pretty saturated. I didn't see it at first, but we tried it and they loved it. We got a great response from them. And so it was enough impetus for us to drag microphones out when we first left LA and begin our own podcast. And that's turned into a YouTube channel. Now we do cameras and lights and the whole thing. But we've been to, I don't know, probably 30 cities at this point, 3 different countries, 4 different countries, 30,000+ miles. We do have our house here in the Villages, like she said, but this place was actually an investment property we purchased before we even sold our house in Los Angeles. So we had this already, and we use it now as a base camp in between journeys. So we have scoured the South, all through the South, at least 6, 7 different cities in Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana, you name it, a bunch of cities, like 4 cities in Alabama. And so we're just kind of on the hunt for our next hometown, like the place where we're going to buy, the quote unquote big house. And so right now we sort of have our eyes set on the Northeast. Connecticut specifically seems to have been a really fruitful visit recently. So I'm actually going to go up there next week. And, hopefully in the next calendar year, we have that sort of, we keep calling it our forever home, like we're a bunch of rescue pets, but in a way we are. And so that's the gist. That's the thrust of the podcast, our adventures. We don't really candy coat the issues that we have with our adult children. Denise has a mother who's 97 who has dementia, and she is now staying here at the Florida property along with us, and Denise is taking care of her. So the complexion of our podcast is sort of always changing because we're empty nesters who are straddling sort of 2 different generations in our family, but yet trying to carve out something that works for us where we can just sort of slag off and have a good time with each other all day. So that's kind of our story at this point.
Yeah, it's that is he said it in a nutshell. Yeah.
It was more than a big nutshell.
That was good.
When we decided to do this, the podcast was not in our scope whatsoever. We sold our house, our cars, our furniture. We sold everything, and really just decided to travel until we found a new place to call home. The podcast came only 30 days before we were getting in the car. We had to be in the car August 1st, and we recorded our very first episode June 15th. That was not even anything we had ever thought about doing. But looking back on it now, I mean, I'm really grateful that we did it, that Bert mentioned it to us, because if all else fails, we have this beautiful video dialogue, diary.
We have the most expensive travel slideshow you've ever witnessed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Bert and his wife Leanne have been so supportive of us over this time. Leanne has had us on her show, Leanne has had us on her show 3 times now. And
it's
so
been twice.
No, we did 2 episodes over Christmas, and then we did the very first episode. So 3 episodes. Yeah. And the best part is their fans were our first early listeners.
Yes.
So we actually made friends. We met a couple of their fans in Covington, Kentucky. That kicked it all off for us. You recently, when we were in New Jersey, you went to visit one of Bert's co-stars, who's also a fan of their show and has been on their show. So
Stephanie, she played his wife in the movie, and she was following our adventures. And she said to me, she's been in a lot of films. She's been in several Martin Scorsese films. And she said, if you're ever in New York, New Jersey, come give me a call. Let's get together. Let's visit. And we did. And we've met very cool people. So it's been an interesting ride. Definitely. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
Did you guys have any thoughts, like say the podcast didn't exist, what were you just going to search around, basically relax, anything?
I have an idea what I was going to do.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's hear you first. Ladies first.
I was just going to look for a new house and enjoy it. And maybe wherever that would be, whatever town that would be, start a small business. That was honestly what I had in mind. I just thought, I don't know what city it's going to be, but I'm going to really enjoy that city, because I don't feel like as a mom and as a business owner, I enjoyed LA, but it was always rush. And I wanted something different in my life now. Like the kids are, I call it in college. He and I are taking the time to find that town for us. I want to enjoy it. I want to decorate this house. I want to become friends with my neighbors. I want to open up a business in this little cute downtown, wherever that may be. That was my vision. That was my vision board.
So
mine was a little different.
Okay.
Mine was a little different in that, because I finally was like, so historically, I worked in the television industry, specifically in post-production. So what that meant was I sat in a box for an hour in my car in LA traffic. And then I went to a box in the studio and I worked for 10 hours. And then I sat in that car again. And so for 12 hours out of the day, I was constantly like confined and had to be in a certain place at a certain time. So the advantage of being able to work remotely and leaving LA for me meant we were going to rent in Savannah 1 month, and then we were going to rent in Nashville a month, and then we were going to rent in Knoxville a month, and we were going to work our way up the East Coast. And eventually I would work from Vermont for a month. So I sort of envisioned it a different way. I would say ultimately so far, what has happened is we're probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, we are. I mean, I knew that we were going to travel. So your whole 1 month here and 1 month there, that was part of my plan too, but I did see us settling down
eventually
sooner,
and we will
kind of.
Yeah, for sure.
It's been over a year though. Like, I know. I mean, I'm like, I don't mind if it happens.
Do you feel any? I bet you don't feel any closer, but kind of narrowed down the traits, right? Like,
we have.
I already heard that you guys thought Europe is out of the question because you won't be able to really like visit the girls as much.
Right. That is true. Yeah. We can't move that far. I mean, I remember having lunch with some friends and we were just chatting about one day, what if, and all of us were saying, oh, we're going to go to Greece and open up a business. And that, that's those dreams you think you're going to do. And it's like, well, no, because my kids aren't going to be able to see me and that's going to be too expensive. I'm not going to Greece. So it sounded great in theory, but then not realistic. So kind of want to stay sort of near them, but I don't know what that means because one's in Texas, one's in Utah, and one's in Connecticut. So I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I guess you'll have to triangulate all three.
Yeah.
But they'll probably move because they're all in. I think one was leaving college, the other were in college.
Yeah,
or something
two
like
are in
that.
college. Yeah, one's a sophomore, one's a junior, and the other one is out of college. So so we have one who's out, two that are still in.
Okay.
So we have narrowed it down. I mean, honestly, when we first got on the road, we were that like, what do you call it? The person who goes on every date and thinks the person.
Oh my gosh, I was the town slut. I really was. Like we rolled into every single town, and I was like, I could totally live here. Like, I would love this place.
Yeah, every place
it didn't even matter. I didn't even see the blemishes. It was just like you're my new girlfriend. You're my new girlfriend. Zion.
Like 3 kids, but he didn't care.
Yeah. You're my new girlfriend, Sedona. You're my new girlfriend, Santa Fe, all the way across the country. So,
also, you mentioned Zion. So, me and my wife have been to Zion.
Yeah,
and I heard a little tidbit that you're afraid of heights. So, do you know what my next question is?
No, what is it?
Did you go to Angel's Landing at all?
I went up to see it. Yeah,
that's where you were.
Yeah, because you could see from where I went.
Oh no,
I believe it was Angel's Landing because you could see 5 different peaks from where I was standing.
Yeah,
and it's like about a half an hour, 40-minute climb, and not all of it has railings. So the minute she saw no railing, she was out.
Okay, so hold on. I went up 7. Wasn't even stairs. It's just rocks. So I went up 7 rocks, and then I just said, I'm not doing this. And he said, what are you going to do? I said, I'll go back to the car, but he had the key. So I couldn't get in the car and it was 100 degrees.
Yeah, it was really
remember
hot.
where I was?
It was really hot. I forget where you were hanging
in the bushes.
Oh yeah, you were she was hiding in shadows, like wherever she could find shade.
Like a lizard.
Yeah, I thought I was gonna see a coyote because I was in their coven or whatever you call it. Like I was
the den.
I was in the coyote den. I was looking for like shelter in between rocks with bushes. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna find a coyote and like all their puppies.
Yeah.
All their little coyotes.
To be fair, yeah, I didn't make it all the way up. I have a fear of heights, and I think my wife didn't have one until she had kids, and then she's like, if I die, what happens to the children?
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about myself.
Mortality becomes real when you have offspring, for sure.
Do you have the fear that you're going to throw yourself over? Because that's
fear of just being clumsy. Like, yeah. I like, and the other thing is, I don't know if you made it up that far, but they show you how many people have died in that year.
Did you see that?
I didn't see that. No.
Yeah, they have like right before you get too far, like it's like where the first like chains are.
Oh yeah.
They tell you like, 13 people have died in the last 2 years from this.
Oh my gosh.
there's that, like, what's the point? That's how I feel. Like, what's the point? To see a couple peaks? No,
It's
not
gorgeous.
interested.
when you're up
Adrenaline.
there. It's totally
Adrenaline.
worth it.
It is
Yeah.
adrenaline. You're
So,
right.
but I do share your concern for clumsiness, because I'm totally a bull in a china shop, and if there was a little piece of gravel on that big stone that I'm standing on, I would be the guy whose foot would find it,
For
and all of a
sure.
sudden I'd be sliding toward the edge and looking ugly, scraping my fingernails, and like hold on to the stone for all I'm worth.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I didn't want him to go. I kept saying, don't do it.
Yeah, she's
Don't
like,
do
you're
it.
gonna fall over.
Yeah.
It's so clumsy.
It's not worth it.
It's really not.
So I assume you guys have perfected your habits. So basically, when you get into town, you guys, what's your, like, what me and my wife love to do any town we go into is a bike ride, just to kind of get a lay of the land, a tour guide. What's your go-to? Like, where do you guys find the best information or stuff like
Food.
that?
Yeah.
Food is our
I was
go-to,
gonna
Michael.
say, our
Food.
food, because so we drive over our limit, and by the time we get to any given town, we're famished, like we're starving. So
Yeah.
the first place we stop, and we really just we're very good at shaking down the bartender or the waitress for any and everything they know for the local area. So that's our initial way of canvassing a place. And usually you could get 3 or 4 locations out of that. They'll give you 1 or 2 activities and 3 or 4 other good restaurants,
They will.
which is great because, waiters and waitresses, they know the best places in town. So,
I mean, we went to Oklahoma City, and the very first restaurant I went to, she told us about the fair.
yeah,
I would not have known about the Oklahoma State Fair had she not told us. We said, hey, what should we do while we're here? And she's like, we got to go to the fair.
yeah.
That was awesome. So yeah, so hitting up waitresses, waiters, bartenders when we get to a city, that's our very first plan of attack.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's nice.
Uh-huh.
And it's funny you mentioned those fairs. I never thought of it, but I feel like, and not to put down the Midwest, but I would imagine the state fairs, like, you're from Ohio, I would imagine the state fair is like humongous.
It's incredible. The Canfield Fair, where I grew up, I don't think it still holds a title, but like my entire childhood, it was the largest county fair in the United States. So it was no joke. It went on for miles, and pigs and you name it, everything. So we had Huey Lewis in the News.
Well, that's a big deal.
Playing, we had a country act. So there'd be sort of one B-lister at the time. Huey Lewis played the Canfield Fair. He was a B-lister at that point. And they'll get a country artist. They'll have a demolition derby, the tractor pulls, all that stuff. It's a big deal. I mean, people are at the grandstand all day long watching things. And so it's just very Americana. To your point, the Midwest really takes pride in their county fairs.
And I don't know if it's tradition or the fact that they have so much like wide space areas. Like, if you were to think about, like, not that New York doesn't have wide space areas, but when you think New York, you always think New York City.
Right.
And when you think Jersey, you think New York's little cousin. You know what I mean? Like,
100%.
all those, you won't
100%.
think the state fair. You would think of any other things that they have, like Maryland,
Yeah.
where I'm from. You wouldn't think that either.
You're from Maryland?
Yeah.
Oh, Maryland's so beautiful. I spent a summer in Annapolis. It was incredible.
Man, I didn't see you saying that.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, it was really funny because it was in the 90s and I was a total metalhead. So I was surrounded by sailors and midshipmen and stuff like that. And so I didn't really fit the profile of being in Annapolis for a summer, but man, my buddy and I had a good time. So
No, that's all. What year did you say?
I would say 92, something like
Okay,
that.
92. 2 things I got to remember. One, I'm going to get flack for this, but I don't like crabs. And I feel like that's such an un-Maryland thing to say.
Yeah.
I don't think opening the crabs and like the 10 steps to get to the
It's a
actual
lot of
crab.
work.
It's not
It's a lot of work.
For like this little meat,
Yeah. Well, I'll get flack, but I don't care. And then 2, I saw that you guys at one point you had listed the cities, because obviously I was looking at the East Coast ones that you guys were going to visit to, and Asheville was one of them. What happened to
It was.
Asheville?
We didn't make it.
Yeah, we still haven't made it.
haven't made it. So we were gonna hit Asheville on the way to Connecticut, but our plans got changed, and my daughter and I had to fly to Connecticut. He had to drive, and he had a deadline. So Asheville's still on our list. Maybe we're hoping seeing with my mother living with us now, it's going to be a little more challenging to get out there, but we're hoping possibly we could hit another city before the end of the year. And Asheville is definitely on that list still, because Asheville has been really popular for the past 10 years. This is not something within the last couple of years. It has been on so many lists, I would say, in the past 10 years. Have you been to Asheville?
I have.
Think of
It's quite nice. It's kind of like, I don't know if this is going to turn you guys off of it. It's like what Seattle was in like 2008. It's like keep Austin weird type vibes, but a more like organic, like I would assume that they vote very liberal there. Like if I had to,
it's a blue dot in a red sea.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Austin in Texas, basically.
Yes. Totally.
But yeah,
I feel like we probably missed the boat on it, to be honest with you. Like
Asheville?
In terms of real estate.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's now like it's probably like, what do you jump the shark, right?
It's a little bit out of reach.
Like, like 5 years ago or 6 years ago, it may have been the place where was more affordable. Now it's the new Austin. Like, it's like the Seattle, what you said exactly. Everyone's like Asheville. So I don't know.
But we did want to get there. I mean, it has been on our map for a while. I had the good fortune to work in Knoxville about 12 years ago. I was there for 3 weeks. They offered me a job. We could not make the money work, but I knew Asheville was just, however many hours away. And then Denise and I actually stayed with the kids once in Bryson City, which is a little too rural for what we want. But everybody was like, if you just go toward Asheville, then you're going to find exactly what you're looking for, plus all of this nature that North Carolina the mountains still has to offer. So
we just didn't make it.
We haven't made it then either. I booked a job and I had, 18 hours basically to get all of our daughter's stuff up to school in Connecticut. So it was with tears in my eyes that I kept driving past the Asheville, the freeway off the 95 where it said, you can go this way to Asheville. And I just kept going.
So would you suggest it as a visit?
I would definitely suggest it for a visit. The only when did I visit it? It was a long time ago. It was in, if I had to guess, 2010. I had a friend who was running track at the university there, and I always thought, because we went to a couple restaurants, that they were going through the trash and doing the like recycling. They were doing like the
they really were.
Yeah, they were.
Were they doing the upcycling is that what you're seeing, like old, making it new?
Yeah, like the employee. Well, not upcycling. Well, that they probably do too. I didn't see that.
They were sifting bottles, or they were sifting?
Yeah, they were like the employees would go through the trash and do the composting. And this was like so long ago. And I like, from where I was from, I was like, what are they doing? Like throw the trash away. Yeah, like it was something like completely off. Like in 2010, where I'm from, that's not like a thing.
They were composting before composting was even a thing.
Exactly. I didn't even know what composting was then. It was like, oh, okay, what are we doing with this pile? We trying to stink up a room? I don't know, right?
They were very what's the word? They were very progressive. They were very progressive.
But yeah, that's why I lumped them in with like Seattle, the same vibes I get with Portland, even though Portland I think's come down a little bit. And obviously Austin now.
Portland's just weird though. Like Portland is weird. It's I can't explain it.
It feels saturated now, though. I mean, when we were there,
so weird.
There are some weird pockets for sure. They're intent on keeping Portland weird.
First, there's no question.
Isn't that where the original phrase came from anyway? Wasn't it from Portland?
Yep.
Yeah. And then Austin took
Austin just co-opted it, but it did feel like there was just.
They're so strange.
It felt like a lot of yuppies in the areas we were when we were in Portland.
Oh, that and Proud Boys.
And Proud Boys,
Proud Boys were there. They were marching while we were there.
I saw somebody offered up a 2-word definition for the state of Oregon, and it was hippie bully. And that was it. It's like hippies and bullies. That was a hippie bully. So
no, I definitely get that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that in Virginia. If you guys have ever been, like, Northern Virginia is like super liberal. You've got like all the granola people, you've got the people working for like the government, all those high.
Yeah, I was going to say, but aren't they conservative? Like, don't they all work for the DOD and all that stuff? Maybe not, huh?
Well, it's different when you have DC there, and just
Yeah.
everybody wants like amazing schools for your children and all
Right.
inclusive
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
But like as soon as you like drive out about like 20 miles, it's completely different. Like
Yeah.
you
Wow.
know when you go to the gas station and you see the Biden stickers and he points to the price of gas and it says, "I did this."
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Well, I actually had to stop for gas in Southern Virginia. And yeah, it felt like just another extension of North Carolina, to be honest. So
yeah. But back on to you guys. What is like what's your big no? Like when you get to a city, each of you, like what is one thing that's kind of like, no, like we can stay the rest of the stay here, but this is not going to be our town. This is completely off the list. Is there anything like that?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
me, it's crime. It's
Okay.
always crime. Crime's like, that's it. I don't care. It could be the most charming downtown. We went to Laurel, Mississippi, and Laurel, Mississippi is one of the most charming 5-mile radius or 3-mile radius. But outside of that, it is
Thunderdome.
Yep. And so I don't care if the house is $200,000. I can't go outside my 3 miles. We found a house for $450,000 or $400,000 that was 4,500 square feet in Louisville,
we found
Kentucky.
a palace in Louisville, Kentucky. It was a palace.
But a mile or two was strip joints, drug dealers, and no. So for me, it's crime. It's always crime.
Tobacco, check cash. Yeah. I understand that.
Yep. Look, I lived on the north side of Chicago when I went to school there and it wasn't a great neighborhood. We'd hear bullets, gunshots, the whole 9 yards. That's something you do when you're in your 20s and you want to be cool and whatever, not in your 50s. You want to be safe in your 50s. You just want to live. You want to be able to wake up the next morning.
Yeah, for sure. I would say mine is Dollar Generals. I just, for me, the Dollar General, if I see a Dollar General in a downtown area, in a main thoroughfare, that is like the heartbeat of the city, I'm out. I can't do, if you want to put a Dollar General on the outskirts of town or over by the freeway or something, that's fine. But on Main Street, forget it. There's no way. There's absolutely no way I can do a Dollar General town.
That's what I learned in Virginia. I thought it was always just like a dollar store. But then I went to the outskirts in some Virginia area and realized that it was actually the grocery store. Like it was a large thing. I didn't even know.
Yeah. And it's nothing against Dollar General or their business model or the people who shop there or what have you. It just tells me that if they're planting it like, bang, that's our flag, we're planting it in the middle of town, that's the best they have to offer. And for me, I'd rather have the 130-year-old pharmacy like the one we found in Kingsville, Texas, or something like that,
Exactly.
And I'd rather go into a rundown mom and pop place and, worry like the gravy's delicious, but were there roaches here? I don't know. I don't care. This food is so good, kind of like place, then to sort of find these chains that, just sort of.
They ruin the landscape and they just cheapen the town. They just cheapen it. So you said it best, really. If they're going to plant their flag there and say, this is the best we can do, we don't really want to be, I agree. I don't want to do that either. Yeah.
And I just, I feel like the towns that have the most pride are never, ever going to allow that to happen. We went to Micanopy, Florida, and they refused to let a Dollar General or whatever the heck it was be put. Yeah. I mean, the people in the local town went nuts when they found out there were plans for this thing, and they totally fought it tooth and nail. And through their efforts, and I think there was some sort of fluke. I remember there was some sort of districting thing or something,
like weight capacity or something
like that. It went, there was a weight capacity. So the tractor trailers that would feed a Dollar General,
they could have gotten in the parking lot.
They could not go down the main street. So that was a deal killer right there. But for whatever reason, it worked out for them. And so like I would say that's the kind of town we're looking for. That
makes complete sense. I saw something, I don't know if it was like a business post or something like that, where you're talking about, like, if you ever want to place a business, always look where the Starbucks are, because they do extensive research on the flow,
Yeah.
on the
Yeah, that's true,
development,
yeah.
and like they don't just throw a location anywhere.
Right.
And it's probably the same way with McDonald's. You know how McDonald's doesn't actually really make much money on their food. Like they make some like money, but the primarily is the real estate. Like they're
Yes.
just like picking these like nice locations that they're thinking is going to flourish, and then the rent goes up, and then
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, the saying goes, if you see a Starbucks, the neighborhood is changing. And there's truth to that. I mean,
Yeah.
if people can afford a $5 cup of coffee, their income is higher than that of a Dollar General. And that's just the truth.
That's true, because in Inglewood, California, they put a Starbucks in on the way to SoFi Stadium, which was a huge endeavor. And but in that section of Inglewood for the longest time, it was a place where people really, you had to go there to get to the Forum. Anybody who knows Los Angeles knows sort of where this area is. But it was not a fantastic neighborhood. So the fact that now it has a Starbucks, traffic's still a nightmare, but at least, you got a couple nice places to choose from on your way to see a game or what have you. And, the property values have increased in that general vicinity.
Yeah. Mhm.
makes complete sense. So you can add that to your algorithm you guys are making, right?
Yeah, we really should. I mean, if we were more mathematically inclined, I think we would sort of have some sort of algorithm when we roll up into a town, some sort of quotient, and then, to judge it. But we do have to be careful, because even though a town's not for us, there have been several towns that we've been in where almost, instantly one of us has had a visceral reaction where it's like, no, I'm not feeling this, but we'll stay here for a few days or what have you. And you got to be careful, because you're talking about the place where people live, and there are people who are proud to live there. So we've always sort of I think even from the earliest conversations we had about it, we've never been inclined to do some sort of rating scale for a hometown or anything like that. It's just kind of BS. It's,
we do a top 5. We'll do a top 5 and a bottom 5.
Things we like and don't
things
like.
we don't like.
Yeah.
Right. But, and I think it's also, to your point, we are there only for a week. Sometimes the goal was to stay a month, but in some places we don't have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Or the truth is we don't want to do that. So we have to be fair that the statements we're making are only based on 7 days.
Yeah.
So we're still just a visitor at that point. Like we stayed in Savannah for a month and almost. And so for us, we felt like we were in it every single day. We felt like locals. Yes. But when you're only in a place for a week, I don't know if you get the same sense. I mean, you get a sense for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. You just don't get that every day. But there are some towns, Michael, where I don't think you necessarily need to be there a month. You can get a good feel for it, especially if it's a small town with a small amount of people. 7 days, you could have done a lot of traveling on that town and have hit a lot of places. So I don't know. I mean, the
disadvantage for us is we don't get to be in every town on 4th of July, because that would be a great litmus test, right?
Yes.
Like, what's the parade like? What are the people like? Do they have hometown pride? And for us, I think that's the biggest thing. Like, we want a place where things are sort of already happening or established. It's a sweet spot, right? It's like, you don't want a place like Asheville that's already popped off, and now you feel like, oh, I can't really, like, I'm trying to double dutch into a house that I can truly afford and all this. But we want a place where there seems to be enough ingenuity, and we can almost instantly become a part of the fabric of the community and start contributing. She wants to open up a business. I want to hang out and talk with bartenders and restaurant people all day. Like, I want to be a part of the community, or, volunteer at the local Boys and Girls Club. We don't have kids. All my kids played sports. I love sports. So, maybe that's in the future for me to just, contribute my time to an organization like that. But we want a town where it's like right away, people are like, hey, you can help out over here.
Yeah.
And we're eager to do that, So.
And a town that we really felt that was Auburn, Alabama.
It's true.
They
Yeah.
really like that would be a town if anybody wanted to jump in and feel welcome and do the Boys and Girls Club, open up a business and get a real community feel. Oh, Auburn, Alabama is a
Laurel,
city.
Mississippi, I would say as well. Laurel, Mississippi was pretty high.
Then you have that outside area that you can't travel to.
I know.
And
Laurel, Mississippi.
question, I'm not a college football guy, but Auburn is in Auburn, correct?
Yeah.
So you didn't
University
have that
of
college type vibe with that?
Oh,
Is that
we
something
did.
that pushes you guys off at all?
No, in fact, I love that because it's young people and it's so much energy in the city. So if there's a college that's in town and the town embraces that college, I'm all for it. That to me is that goes in a check mark that's on the right side. Like, yeah, this is for me.
I have one for your list that I completely forgot.
Oh, tell us.
Definitely take a visit to Blacksburg. Blacksburg, Virginia Tech is in Blacksburg,
in Virginia.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they are very like that. So I'm from Maryland, like I said, and going to Virginia, people where I'm from in Maryland, Mocha, we call it, are very like direct. They don't hold the door for you. They're like not nice, not the nicest people to strangers. But you go to Virginia Tech, like everyone holds the door for you. It's like,
oh nice.
Like it's like a 10-second wait. It's not like and
they're like, you don't have to run.
Yeah. And it's like that type vibe. And they've got so many like small town stuff just because, it's a college town and stuff like that.
Yeah, we're gonna have to check it out for sure.
At least look at some videos to see.
Thank you.
Don't book the tickets.
For sure. But I would say overall, a university town is definitely on our list, especially if it's close to, sort of a mid-range, larger airport. Yeah. I find there are a lot of advantage. Like, look, we're in our 50s now. A university hospital is going to become important to us at some point in the future. Yeah. Salt Lake City is one of my favorites for that reason alone. They have a fantastic, medical network there. I think, and like Salt Lake City or like Blacksburg, where you're talking about, or even when I spent time in Knoxville, the University of Tennessee is right there. You get these kids like all over, like I say kids, but they're young adults all over the place. I just feel like it's great for the vibrancy of a community to have old folks, young folks, everybody mixing in. You go to the town square, you see people of all stripes. That's kind of like our vibe. That we're into that. Mm-hmm. So
yeah.
And I don't mind not being the smartest person in the room. And I don't mind if a younger person is the smarter person than me in that room, as long as they're getting their medical degree or what, it's good to know that the future's in good hands, so we feed off that vibe.
Absolutely.
So let's say, and you've probably had this since your podcast has been going on for a year. What have you said to people who are trying to do something similar to that? Obviously not the podcast part, but basically selling all their things and looking for a new hometown to go to.
You want to go first?
I would say don't ask permission. Just do it. Especially if you're at a point in your life where you feel like you've done everything right and you've lived in a certain place for the longest time and your kids are grown. I mean, I'm just speaking specifically about empty nesters because that's our bracket. But really anyone, even millennials, if you find yourself sort of floundering around or what have you, and you believe there's something better out there for you, there absolutely is. And don't bounce the idea off your brother or off your mother or off of, your best friend or whatever. Just if you're feeling it, then, lay down a little bit of groundwork and go for it. That would be my advice.
I have a listener who found us through Bert and Leanne, and she has 4 grown children and did exactly what we're doing. Exactly. Single woman though. And she reaches out to me. She's so sweet and she'll send me messages. And she did just recently ask me my thoughts about her driving from, she is right now in New Jersey to California because 2 of her children live there. I told her I didn't advise it she's like in her 60s. That's a long drive. If it was New Jersey to Georgia, fine. but New Jersey to California, I said, bring a friend,
What is that, like 2,600 miles or something like that?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's ridiculous.
It's just dangerous. What if the car breaks down? I mean, it's just a safety issue. And, but I love that she did what we did, and we are searching for a moderate, temperature wise, I want a moderate tempered place. I don't want too cold. I don't want too hot. She, on the other hand, is so different. She wants really, really cold. Like, she's looking in Vermont. So I'm sending her to like Wisconsin, to Michigan. I'm like, these are the places you want to visit. And then she's sending me to like other areas that are more, she's like, oh, this place was too warm for me, Denise. You and James should check it out. So I'm all for it. I mean, I have a girlfriend who has talked about leaving and moving elsewhere. And since we did it, it's really hard for me not to be a proponent about it, because our experience has been so good. And
so you're the exact opposite of talking to your friends. Oh yeah, do it. And then you find out that they've got like $50,000 or $100,000 of debt already.
We are definitely the devil on your shoulder. Yeah. So like, we're the wrong person to listen to. If you're on the fence about going and like picking up and leaving, if you're the least bit concerned about what you're leaving behind, you probably don't want to dip into our show, because we are the ones who are going to get you loading that car for sure.
So we have no regrets about it. So we're not that person that did it and thought, and now we're saying, oh, I don't know, you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
We did it, and we're still really enjoying it. And some of it hasn't turned out the way we had planned, and other things have been way better than we ever anticipated.
Yeah. It's not always pretty, but it's working.
But sometimes it's really pretty.
Yeah, sometimes it's amazing.
But I feel like you always have to have those like bad moments to make the good moments feel so much better. Like, I was going to mention this, you guys, and this happens when I go on trips with my wife, because we never really spend one-on-one time together. But you guys, I mean, your hours together has dramatically increased, right? You're working on the show and you're driving and you're traveling so much, right? Like, how have, in this last year, from, I guess, when you had your yard sale to now, how much, like if you had to say, how much do you know each other better than you did that year ago? Because I feel like that time just gets so condensed, especially in turmoil, in like bad times and good times, that you realize stuff about each other more.
I think from my perspective, I get to see, because Denise's full-time job is working on the show. And so she is its only full-time employee at this point. I do it, but I'll edit an episode and then I go back to my job, or we'll sit and record. And so just, when she ran her business in Los Angeles, we weren't together day to day. And so just seeing her sort of resiliency and her ability to pivot when, like a social media thing falls flat on its face, or it's time to replace, maybe the service we're using here isn't the best service for us, and it's like the wheels are always spinning, sometimes until 2 or 3 in the morning for her. And it's just, it's magnificent to watch, because I never got to see her in that capacity. Like, we never ever worked together before, and so that part has been really illuminating, just to how she thinks, sides of her I've never seen before.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, in a great way, so
thanks.
Yeah.
For me with him, you know what? This trip has been really surprising, because he's a very quiet person. Like, when we're together, and I've mentioned this before, that my biggest fear on doing this trip was that he wouldn't talk, because on his days off, he's watching TV, or he's on his phone, or he's on the computer or something. And I get it. Like, he worked really hard. He worked 60 hours that week, and he's just trying to escape. But it took me a long time to realize that that's what he was trying to do, was escape. Now I know what it was, but that doesn't negate the fact that he was very quiet. So he's talked a lot. Like, the fact that he wanted to do a podcast, I was like, you want to do a podcast? You don't even talk. Like, how do you want to do a podcast?
What am I going to say?
Yeah. So he very talkative in the car. And that is something that is completely new. And we've been together for 25 years. Never talked in the car before. Never. So I'd bring magazines, Michael. Magazines when we go on road trips, because I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not going to sit here in silence. He's out of his mind.
She's all militant about it. I can be in my head a lot for sure, but I just think that escape that she's talking about, I've been able to find through travel now,
No, that's great.
Yeah.
The only reason I bring that up is just, it's always like, you don't understand it until you've actually gone through it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's across the board on many things, but that's one thing with my wife. I feel like I always get like a brand new side of her if we've got like a condensed amount of time in a completely different ecosystem.
Yeah.
And maybe without the kids too.
Oh, 100%. I remember we were starting this trip. I've said this story a couple of times where a client of mine at the spa, her wheels were going when I told her I was closing my business and what I was doing. And I could just see it. And she started asking me questions like, if I wanted to do what you're doing, what would be the first thing? Like, what would the very first thing? So the very first thing I asked her was her job a job that she could do remotely? Or was she willing to give up that job and try something else? But her job, she could do remotely. She was a teacher. So she was already doing online classes. Anyway, then several questions I asked her. Then one of the questions was, have you traveled with your husband in the car for like more than a couple of hours? And she had not. And I said to her, okay, I go, before you put that for sale sign up at your house, you have to do a road trip, like an overnight, just even if it's a Friday to a Saturday.
Please don't tell me this turns into a murder situation.
Sounds like it's going to turn into a crime podcast.
No, I mean, but it was honestly, I told her,
True crime with Denise Gordon. Go on.
I said, you have to see, do you like the music he plays? Does he make like weird sounds with his mouth when he's driving? Does he tap his foot all the time? Like, these are things that will drive you crazy across country trip. I mean, if it's driving you crazy for just 7 hours on an overnight trip. So, just that, like, and if you're not in a car with somebody, will not know that. I mean, look, everyone knows that a trip can make or break a relationship. Oh, a car ride can too.
Yeah, that's facts. That's facts. Really.
Yeah, I feel like people are completely different. It's like I try to eat as healthy as possible when I'm home, but as soon as you get me on a road trip, it's just like you have free license over any tummy sour snack. Like,
that's right.
I don't know why everyone, and I'll pay any price.
Yeah.
Yep. Hey, everybody should buy road snacks like they're a 9-year-old. I mean, that's just the way it needs to be.
Somebody said to me one time, there are no rules on the road. There are no rules when it comes to food. You just do whatever you want. I'm like, oh, because that's how we behave, actually.
The first several months, and we started to pay a price, especially with my personal waistline, I was like, we got to do a little more hiking, a lot less barbecue or whatever.
Yeah.
No, that's a funny one. So you guys mentioned that your 3 daughters and you've got your mom you're taking care of.
Yeah.
Tell me if this is too deep of a question. I heard a quote a week back or 2 weeks, and I was like, this would be perfect for the interview. It's from a different language, so I'm going to try to remember it as best I can. But by the time to pay back your parents for all the stuff they did to raise you, it's too late.
Oh.
Do you feel like, well, we'll ask about like your parents. Do you guys feel like you've given them enough back? And then we'll ask, what do you think about your kids? Because I think about it like I don't need anything from my kids. Like, I'm just happy they're here.
Yeah.
I think I've definitely given my parents back. I was always a really good kid and I did a lot for my parents. My parents were older. So my mom had me when she was 45 and my dad was 50. So put it into perspective, when I was 20, my dad was 70 years old. So, I grew up with parents that everyone, no matter where I was, thought were my grandparents. So in some ways, I probably treated them like that. And the way you treat your grandparents is always much different than the way you would treat your parents. So I always had a sense of taking care of them from a very young age. I mean, on our third date, what did I say to you?
Yeah, you said if we're going to be together, then one day, I'm just letting you know my parents are part of the deal because they're so much older. So
yeah, and they'll be probably living with us.
Yeah,
Man, that's good that he remembered that. Look at that. That was quick.
Well, I mean, it is. So by the time I met her parents, they were already in their 80s, and so it was
78.
Upon the first meeting, it was pretty apparent. Her father at that point was already at the stage where all he wanted to do was watch Fox News all day long and sit in the bed or sit in the couch and sit in the bed. And he would go from one room to another. And that was it. That was his day. He did find some things to do outside to keep him busy, yard work and whatnot. But for the most part, I knew like they were already octogenarians pretty much like the day that I met them. So, when I met them, of course, I remembered my deal that I made with her. Like, if we're going to be together, this is going to be a thing in my life. So it was pretty apparent. I mean, it's easy to not forget.
I mean, my parents were very, very generous.
Absolutely.
So to say that I took care of them, it's not fair because they really financially very much took care of me and James and our three kids. Always, like, their wallet was always open to our family and to my brothers. To be fair, everyone got their fair share financially from my parents, but they were always there as parents too. So they definitely did more for me than I did for them. But I was a very giving child. There's no question about it. I did a lot for my parents.
Yeah. I would say in my case, I had both of my parents are deceased, but you use the words, realizing it too late. I would say with my father, I definitely realized I could have been a lot more helpful to him before he passed away. And he died fairly young. He died at 57. It was sudden. It was a heart attack. And I had to be the one to go to his place and sort of go through everything. It's in an unexpected death, you realize just how people are living because everything is stuck right there in that moment. And so what I realized was my father probably, he's a prideful guy. He was his own man, but he probably could have used a bit of financial help from me as his son that he was never, ever going to ask for. And so I feel like I could have been a little more intuitive in terms of being able to provide him some of that assistance when he was alive. And it does bother me a little bit, even to this day, that I wasn't really reading the tea leaves on that. With my mother, it was a slightly different situation. She had my stepfather, and it was kind of like her. I was a very good son to her, talked to her at least 2-3 times a week, always in tune with sort of where she was and what was going on. But she was more of a person that was not really inclined to help herself, and my stepfather was the same way. So it was more a situation like I was sort of parenting. We talked about this, parenting your parents in one of our episodes. And I just felt like every ounce of advice, the slightest bit of advice I could give my mother to like improve her life just a little bit, always fell on deaf ears. And so in the end, I feel like, it's weird. It's like with one parent, I felt like I could have given more. On the other hand, I felt like I gave more than I could possibly ever give another human being. It was only because she was my mother that I was willing to go as far as I did, So most people would have cut bait and moved on to a different, relationship. In my view, you don't get to do that with your mom. So, but I did my best,
Going through your dad's stuff with such an abrupt death, that must be like one of the hardest moments you've ever had, right?
Yeah, it was made especially difficult at the time because my brother was a truck driver and he was driving, he was on the road, and he had, my niece and nephew were very small at the time, and it caused a lot of friction between he and I because he actually still lived in the hometown where my dad lived. I was all the way out in Los Angeles, I think we said at the top of this, I grew up in Ohio. So, a very small town in Ohio. And there was a sense of entitlement on my brother's part because he had been around all these years and had visited on weekends or whenever he was available. His kids had a relationship with my father that my children did not because I was so far away. And now all of a sudden I was like big brother coming in here and sort of swinging my weight around or whatever and calling the shots on the funeral. And it was a very, very difficult time. I had a couple of like my two uncles, my dad's brothers, were super instrumental in sort of righting the ship between my brother and I and just guiding us through a tremendously painful process. But I would say, realizing, and this is just, we've talked about this a little bit in our episodes here and there, it comes up, but just the cost of medical care in the United States and realizing my dad was paying like $700 a month in small town Ohio for his meds just to stay alive every month. And so that was like, there was just so much I didn't know about his life, and what he was keeping from me, just so it was in a way he was shielding it from me. And I guess that's a difference between my two parents. Now that we're talking about him, I'm going deep, but one parent didn't shield me from any of the BS and one parent shielded me from all of it. And so but during that time, it was it was a painful process. I'm super eternally grateful to my uncles who really just showed my brother and I a lot of love and a lot of patience during that time. And fortunately, I'm happy to say that, my brother just came down to visit me for my birthday back in May. And, we still get along tremendously. Our relationship's better than it's ever been as adults. And so that was the one bright spot to come out of it. And, I think my dad would be happy with the result. So.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny how those like really soul crushing moments come back and kind of make it better than it was. Last question, and feel free to take your time to think about it, each of you. What is something that your parents did that you passed on to your girls or are still passing on to your girls? And what is something that you kind of did new or different that your parents did? And we can kind of add on to what you both said.
Yeah. Do you know your answer yet?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
So my dad was very much a 1950s type of guy where the woman's place was in the kitchen. That's just how it was. But he and my mom both raised me to not take shit from anybody. I mean, my dad, he was a Chicago cop. And if anyone just wronged me in the slightest, it was like, we're taking them to task. And he was like that my entire life. I was going to be a lawyer and he was my biggest advocate. I mean, really like my whole life, my whole adult life. I remember when I had kids, it was like, I think my third kid, and he came to visit. They came to visit often. And we were having dinner and he said to me, does anyone here ever talk about how you are magna cum laude at Loyola University of Chicago? Does anyone in this house ever talk about that? And I said, why would they, Dad, when my biggest task is stacking the dishwasher? And he's like, well, somebody should be talking about that. And this is a guy who like this is a guy who didn't even know what the washer and dryer was in our home. He didn't even know what the toaster was. Okay. Like my mom did everything for him. So the fact that he treated me like that was so different for a man in his era to have that for me. So I would say that is something that they instilled in me that I definitely instill in my daughters. Something different though, that I would say, that I've done differently with them is I do discuss things more. Like when I grew up, it was just the way it was. I mean, there was not a whole lot of discussion. Like, this is the way it is. So you don't question it. But with my girls, that's not the case. I'm their biggest advocate about life things. So, whereas my mom wasn't always my biggest advocate, and I say my mom because she was with me all the time. If something bad happened at school and I came to her crying, she wasn't like, oh, I'm going to call the principal. And you know why? Because no one did that back then. No one called the principal. No one questioned a doctor. I've drilled into my girls, you question everything. I don't care. Like, when we were growing up, we feared authority. You don't question an adult. They know best. No, I'm completely opposite. Adults know nothing. Like, they are just old people. If there is a problem, you question it.
Yeah. I would say in my case, the things that my parents did that I still do for my children, the biggest thing I would say would be cookouts. We were huge with cookouts growing up. I grew up on a lake. Everybody, not everybody, the rich people had boats. Unfortunately, my one uncle was one of them. But every weekend was sort of a cookout at grandma's house, burgers, dogs. On a great day, you had brisket. When we first bought our house in LA, you know, you walk through the inside and it was like this 1940s orchard house. And it was just like kind of run down and super basic. And then I walked into the backyard and I saw this behemoth brick grill. And I was like, this is our house. Like, this is totally where we're moving.
Yeah, I'll that brick grill.
Yeah. And cut to, you know, a month later, I realized, it's really like gumming up the vision of the backyard and everything. So I took a sledgehammer to it. But we spent so many summers at that pool, like all day, every day, inviting friends over, you name it. And I would be at the grill the entire day. Like, there were parties we had, I invited like 60, 70 people. I'd be just sweating and cooking and sipping a beer and loving life. It was like the best thing.
Guarding the ship.
Yeah, yep. I would say, are you okay? Like, he'd be dripping. And so I'm like, are you okay? He's like, I'm great. What's wrong?
Yeah. So, but you know, little things too, like holiday traditions. Like, I am the stocking stuffer guy in the house. So I was always like, just, you know, stuffing as much crap as I could in, like, just worthless junk that I found at Walgreens or whatever. And just stuffing it in there. So the kids had that one extra boost after they were done opening their presents. So that was kind of one thing. And then I'd say the one thing that we do differently that my parents didn't do, when I left LA, I didn't know if I was ever going to see my parents again. If things didn't go well with me, or if I wasn't doing well financially, I knew my parents were not the type to just get on a plane and come visit me. And in fact, my father had never made it to Los Angeles before he passed away. The one thing that we do differently than my parents did for me was, I knew when I moved to Los Angeles that I may never, ever see my parents again, because they were very small town minded and a little bit of old school, like you were talking about, where it's like the kids should return home to see their parents and we don't have to go visit them. And so I knew if I wasn't making any sort of money to fly home to see my parents, I wasn't going to see them very often for the rest of my life, especially because Denise and I were starting a family in Los Angeles. So my father never, ever made it out to Los Angeles. He passed away too early. And then my mother did come out, but the only time my mother ever really came out was when I bought the ticket for her.
That's true.
And so it was just like kind of where I came from. Like, people didn't make that sort of effort. If you left, and that's on you, was sort of the mentality in the town where I grew up. And I would say the one thing we've already proven we're doing differently is we're looking for a house near, Hartford, Connecticut, or New Haven, Connecticut, so we can be close to one daughter. We helped our other daughter, buy a house in Corpus Christi.
And we stayed there for 2 months with her.
Yeah. And it's like last year I went and I cooked food for my daughter in Salt Lake City. I stayed there for a week and, invited all her friends over for dinner and all that stuff, and love to go see football games. So we are actually, unlike my parents, like, we are more than eager to chase our children all over the country. So, and we understand, like, they're starting their own lives now. They're going to be starting their own families, and we're going to be just a part of that eventually. Right. But we have the means, fortunately, so far, and the mobility. Why should we? It's a lot easier for us to buy 2 plane tickets than it is for them to sort of uproot their lives or stop their own dreams to figure out how to be around us.
Yeah. And when you were talking about that, it reminds me of like when me and my wife like got married, had kids. You start having that conversation like, oh, where are we going for Christmas? Like, on Mother's Day, like,
yeah,
we've got to celebrate you. It's not just about like your mom too. It's like you got to think of the grander picture about like
Yeah.
who to celebrate and what to give a certain, I don't know, appreciation for your moms too.
Completely. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess you guys will have to deal with that at some point.
I hope
Yeah.
not too soon.
Well, that's true. That is true.
Life, things are complicated enough a certain day. We don't need that quite yet.
Yeah. But yeah, those are great answers, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And is there anything you guys are working on? You guys want to shout out?
What are we working on? Good question. I mean, we're just, we are continually in the process of trying to build our YouTube channel, youtube.com/at Skiptown All-Stars is the handle there. And, follow us on social media.
Yeah, we have a lot of different videos we do on YouTube. So the podcast is one thing. We have an hour-long format on the podcast, but we do these little shorts on YouTube. They're not really shorts because they're 20-minute. We do an Ask a Local. They're 20-minute segments where we'll go and visit a town, and we won't just talk about real estate or how the people are, the crime or the food. We'll actually spend a day with a local from that town, and those capture so much about that small town through that person's eyes. And that's something that we really love to do. And that's just on our YouTube. It doesn't translate well as a podcast. It just doesn't. You need to see the person, you need to see the expressions. We follow them around in their car. We'll be in the car with them or on the sidewalk or walking.
Recently in Bernie, Texas, we did one at a brewery, and we did one with a local artist. His name's Pat Childress. We've done them in Natchitoches, Louisiana. We've done them in Auburn, Alabama.
Yep.
I recently did one. We actually went home to my hometown for a little birthday party for my baby niece. And I actually was the host of my own Ask a Local in that particular episode.
Yes.
That'll be, I know, it was my own guest.
Yes.
Yeah. So that'll be dropping soon.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it, guys. Thank you for being on. I had fun, just like I do with all my guests.
Thank you for having us. This is such a great show that you're doing. Yes. I mean, like, in a way, it's sort of enviable for us because, you get to meet all these interesting people. Like, we love doing the Ask a Locals. But
I was just saying, that's exactly what I do.
I know, but it requires us to go into another city. And it's like, here you are, like on a weeknight, and you're just like, bam, let's pull up the Zoom. Who do we got tonight? And I was like, I love the sort of spontaneity of that.
Yours is even harder, though.
Creativity involved in that, for sure.
You have to walk up to these people. I don't even know how you would go up.
Normally, we try and set it up a little bit ahead of time. So, but we like to find something unique in every town. If you could just Google whatever we're talking about, then it kind of defeats the purpose of the podcast, So it's pretty important for us to sort of,
do a spin on it of some sort, a hometown spin or our spin, whatever it is.
Yeah, find a little something. But there are certainly, like, we've struck gold in certain spots where, I mentioned that place in Louisiana. The hotel manager, she was more than happy to talk to us for 20 minutes the one day. And so, just the amount of information we got about the hotel, the city at large, and everything from her. It was a
Front Street Inn.
Yeah.
It was really
Church Street Inn.
Oh, that was it. Sorry, Church Street. Yeah.
So to make it quick, we had interviewed people who weren't really liking their hometown, and then we interviewed her, and she loves it there. So it was like a great counterpoint for that particular episode. And it ended up being a lot of fun. It always ends up being a lot of fun. That's the best part. It's like watching. I'm sure Denise gets a little bit of enjoyment. She says I'm quiet, but
you're not being right now.
I'm definitely not being. I know I'm talking a lot right now. I know, but anyway, I'll talk to anybody.
He was too tired being on the, I guess you would call it business, James. Now he's talkative Jimmy.
He is.
Yeah, for sure.
I love that concept, though. If you guys ever, I know this would be difficult, but you would do some transplant person and then someone who was like raised there in the same town.
Oh, that'd be fun. Yeah, that would be really fun. Do a transplant.
That's a lot of work already. So put that on the bottom of the list.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. Put just more on our plate. It's good.
Yeah.
We just need a crew, but
yeah.
So much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, if you could see the other three sides of this wall, very unprofessional. That's how you can tell that's on my list.
Well, it looks great on this angle. So
right.
yeah, you're doing fantastic. So thank you.
Yeah, and congrats on all your episodes. I mean,
Yeah.
they're tremendously entertaining. You
Like
are
you say,
the man when
that's
it comes to
the
like
hard
getting
part.
these stories out of people. You got me to talk about my brother. I never talk about my brother.
Okay, well, I'll let you guys go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having us, Mike.
Thank
Oh
you.
yeah, thanks guys.
If you like this week's episode of People More Interesting Than Me, please follow me on Apple Podcasts so you won't miss out on more episodes like these.